Evan Mitchell adjusted his bow tie in the small mirror of the chapel dressing room. The fabric slick under his sweaty fingers, the hum of the air conditioning doing little to ease the heat rising in his chest. It was a warm September afternoon in Franklin, Tennessee, and Evan, a 34-year-old electrician who'd spent his life wiring homes and fixing circuits, was about to marry Sienna, the woman he'd loved for 3 years. She'd walked into his life at a local diner, her smile bright as the neon sign outside, her laugh a melody he couldn't shake. They'd dated through her year-long stint in Nashville managing a boutique, survived late-night calls and weekend drives to see each other, and last spring, he proposed on a quiet hill overlooking the Cumberland River, a $5,000 ring he'd saved for by working overtime for nearly a year. She'd said yes with tears in her eyes, and Evan felt like he'd won the lottery. Now, standing in the chapel, the stained-glass windows casting rainbow light across the wooden pews, he watched her glide down the aisle, her ivory dress clinging to her frame, her blonde hair swept into loose waves, her hazel eyes locked on his. Evan's heart raced, not from nerves, but from a joy so deep he thought it might burst. His best man, his brother Dylan, clapped him on the shoulder with a grin. "You did it, man. She's a keeper. Don't mess this up." Evan laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. "I'm the luckiest guy here," he whispered, and he meant it, they said. Their vows, her voice soft but steady, promising to love him through every storm. Evan's own words came out rough, raw with emotion. They kissed, her lips tasting like mint and promises. The crowd cheered, and for a moment, Evan believed nothing could touch them. The reception unfolded in a blur of string lights and laughter at a nearby barn venue, Sienna glowing as they danced, her head resting on his shoulder. Evan had spent months fixing up their new home, a cozy one-story craftsman on the edge of Franklin. He'd even painted the bedroom her favorite shade of lavender, a color she'd picked from a magazine. "It's called lilac," she'd corrected him with a playful smirk. That night, after the last guests left, Evan carried her through the front door, her laughter echoing in the quiet house. "Don't drop me, Evan. I'm not fixing your back at midnight," she teased. He grinned, setting her down gently. "Only one way to find out," he said, pulling her close, but as he leaned in, his hands on her waist, expecting the intimacy of a wedding night, Sienna stiffened, her smile fading. She stepped back, her arms crossing over her dress. "Not tonight, Evan." Her voice was sharp, final. Evan blinked, the warmth in his chest cooling. "What do you mean?" he asked, trying to keep his tone light. "I'm just not ready," she said, her eyes darting away. "Just because we're married doesn't mean you get to expect things." The words landed like a punch. Evan's hands fell to his sides. "Okay," he said softly, forcing a smile. "It's been a long day. I get it." He told himself she was overwhelmed. The wedding, the guests, the pressure. She'd come around tomorrow. He was sure of it. But as Sienna turned and walked to the bedroom alone, her dress trailing behind her like a ghost, Evan stood in the living room, the lavender walls he'd painted for her glowing faintly in the moonlight, a strange ache settling in his gut. He didn't know it then, but that ache was the first crack in a foundation he'd thought was unbreakable. And as the night stretched on, Evan lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, the joy of the day fading into a quiet, uneasy doubt, wondering if the woman he'd married was the same one he'd fallen in love with. The morning light filtered through the kitchen window of Evan Mitchell's Franklin home, casting soft shadows on the hardwood floor he'd refinished himself. A month had passed since their wedding day. A month since Sienna's sharp refusal on their wedding night had left him sleeping on the couch. Evan sat at the counter, a cup of black coffee cooling in his hands, the house quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. He'd spent the past 4 weeks trying to bridge the gap between them, hoping the woman he'd married would return to the one he'd fallen in love with. He cooked her favorite dinner, grilled chicken with rosemary, a recipe she'd once raved about, lit candles, even played her favorite Norah Jones album on the old record player he'd fixed for her birthday. But every attempt at closeness ended the same. Sienna pulling away, her hazel eyes cold, her voice clipped. "I'm not in the mood, Evan," she'd say. Or worse, "Stop trying so hard. It's not going to change anything." Each rejection stung deeper, carving a hollow space in his chest he didn't know how to fill. Evan tried talking instead, asking about her day, her work at the boutique, anything to feel connected. But Sienna shut him down, her answers short, distracted, "It's fine," or "busy," before turning back to her phone. The device had become her constant companion, its screen lighting up the bedroom at night, her fingers tapping out messages with a focus she never gave him. Evan noticed the way she'd smile at the screen, a soft, private smile that made his stomach twist. "Who are you texting?" he asked one night, keeping his tone casual, the glow of her phone casting shadows across her face. "Work stuff," she replied. Too quick, too flat, her eyes not leaving the screen. Evan nodded, but the answer felt hollow, a placeholder for a truth she wouldn't share. Sienna's behavior shifted in other ways. She started staying out late, claiming she had errands after work. "I need to pick up some things for the store," she'd say, but she'd return empty-handed, her hair freshly styled, a faint scent of perfume, not the citrus one she usually wore, but something richer, muskier, clinging to her skin. Evan caught her once, standing by the front door, adjusting her earrings in the mirror, her reflection catching his gaze. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice steady but his gut tight. "I told you." "The store," she said, brushing past him, her tone daring him to push further, but he didn't. Not. Then, what unnerved him more were her questions, out of the blue, over breakfast or while he was sorting invoices for his electrical business. "How many clients do you have lined up this month?" she'd ask, her voice casual but her eyes sharp. "Do you keep all your tools insured? Or, what's the profit margin on a big job?" Evan frowned the first time. "Why do you care about that?" he asked, half laughing. "Just curious," she said. But there was no warmth in it, no real curiosity. It felt like she was taking inventory, measuring him not as a husband, but as a business, a means to an end. The doubt that had started on their wedding night grew heavier, a weight Evan couldn't shake. He noticed other things, small but sharp. Sienna's laughter, once so easy around him, had vanished, but she'd giggle at her phone, quiet. Little bursts of joy that weren't for him. She'd leave the room to take calls, her voice muffled behind closed doors, and once, when he walked past the bedroom, he heard her whisper, "Not now. He's here." Before hanging up quickly, Evan's heart sank. The pieces didn't fit, not yet, but they were starting to form a picture he didn't want to see. He kept trying, bringing her coffee in bed, leaving notes on the fridge, even buying her a bouquet of daisies from the farmer's market she used to love. But Sienna barely glanced at them. "Thanks," she'd say, setting them aside, her voice as cold as the lilac walls he'd painted for her. Evan stopped reaching as often. The rejections too raw, the distance too wide. He'd lie awake at night, her phone glowing on her nightstand, her fingers typing, 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 a secret world he wasn't part of. And as the days turned into weeks, Evan's hope faded, replaced by a growing suspicion that the woman he'd vowed to love forever was hiding something. Something that might break him if he ever found out. The late afternoon sun dipped low over Franklin, Tennessee, painting the living room of Evan Mitchell's home in a warm golden hue. The lavender walls he'd painted for Sienna seeming to glow with a deceptive calm. It had been 6 weeks since their wedding, and the distance between them had grown into a chasm Evan could no longer ignore. He'd come home early from a job site, a wiring project at a new office building finished ahead of schedule, his toolbox still heavy in his hand as he stepped through the front door. The house was silent, too silent, the usual hum of Sienna's boutique playlists absent. He set the toolbox down, the metallic clank echoing in the empty space, calling out, "Sienna, you here?" But no answer came. He moved toward the hallway, the faint creak of the floorboards under his boots the only sound. Then he heard it, a low murmur from the bathroom, the door slightly ajar, the shower off. Evan's pulse quickened. He approached cautiously, the instinct to turn away, warring with a need to know. Pressing his ear to the crack, he caught her voice, hushed and urgent. "He doesn't suspect anything yet. Just hold off a little longer." A pause then. "We're close. I can feel it." Evan's breath caught, his mind racing to fill the gaps. Who was she talking to? What were they close to? The floorboard groaned under his weight, and the voice stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was deafening. A few seconds later, the door swung open. Sienna stepped out, her phone clutched tightly in her hand, her blonde hair slightly mussed, her hazel eyes wide with a mix of surprise and defiance. "Evan? What are you doing?" Her tone was sharp, accusing. He forced a smile, playing it off. "Just got home early. Thought I'd surprise you with dinner," he said, nodding toward the kitchen. Her gaze narrowed, her jaw tight. "I was on a work call," she said quickly, too quickly. "At 5 p.m. on a Friday?" he asked, keeping his voice light. But his gut twisted. "Do you not trust me?" she shot back, stepping past him, her perfume a new, spicy scent, trailing behind her. Evan didn't respond, but the question lingered, a barb in his mind. He watched her retreat to the bedroom, the door clicking shut, and the unease that had been brewing since their wedding night solidified into something darker. He couldn't shake the feeling she was hiding a life he wasn't part of, and as the days passed, his suspicions turned toward Dylan, his younger brother and best man. Dylan had been around more since the wedding, popping by under the guise of checking on Evan's electrical business, but his visits always seemed to coincide with Sienna's free time. Evan noticed the way Dylan's eyes lingered on her when she walked into the room, a flicker of something too familiar in his grin. "How's married life, bro?" Dylan would ask, his tone teasing. Evan would force a laugh, still figuring it out. He'd say, but Sienna's presence changed the air. She'd give Dylan a quick, almost instinctive smile, a look that passed between them like a shared secret. It was subtle, but it gnawed at Evan, a primal instinct telling him something was off. One evening, while Sienna was out, another errand she claimed, Dylan dropped by, unannounced, carrying a six-pack of beer. "Thought we'd hang out," he said, settling onto the couch. Evan joined him, the TV flickering with a football game neither watched. Dylan's questions veered oddly personal. "You ever think about expanding the business? Maybe hiring more hands?" he asked, sipping his beer. Evan shrugged. "Maybe. Why?" Dylan leaned back. "Just thinking. You've got a lot on your plate. Sienna might want more stability." The comment felt loaded, and when Sienna returned, her hair windswept, her smile brighter than it had been with Evan all week. Dylan's grin widened. They chatted easily, laughing at a joke Evan didn't catch, and as Dylan left, he clapped Evan's shoulder. "Take care of her, man," his voice carrying an edge Evan couldn't place. That night, lying beside Sienna, her phone glowing again, Evan's mind replayed the scene. The whispers in the bathroom, Dylan's lingering looks, the way Sienna seemed more alive with his brother than with him. He turned to her, her face illuminated by the screen. "Who were you talking to earlier?" he asked, his voice low. She didn't look up. "Work," she muttered, the same flat lie. Evan closed his eyes, the doubt now a certainty. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, and Dylan, his own brother, might be at the center of it. The realization hit like a current through a live wire, jolting him awake. He knew he had to dig deeper, to face the truth, no matter how much it hurt. And as the night deepened, the house felt less like a home and more like a trap, closing in around him with every unanswered question. Rain tapped against the windows of Evan Mitchell's Franklin home, a steady rhythm that matched the storm brewing inside him. It was late October, 7 weeks since the wedding that had once promised a lifetime of joy, now tainted by suspicion. Evan sat at his cluttered desk in the spare room he used as an office, his laptop open, a dim lamp casting shadows over invoices and work orders for his electrical business. The whispers he'd overheard in the bathroom. "He doesn't suspect anything yet. Just hold off," played on a loop in his mind. Sienna's cold dismissals, her late nights, and Dylan's lingering looks had pushed him past doubt into action. He decided to stop wondering and start digging. Evan began with their shared phone plan, something Sienna had insisted on to save money, a decision he now saw as a rare stroke of luck. Logging into the account online, his fingers hesitated over the keys, part of him still hoping he was wrong, but the call logs told a different story. Dozens of late-night calls to the same number, often while he was asleep beside her or out on a job. The number belonged to Dylan, his own brother. Evan's chest tightened. His brother, his best man, the guy who'd toasted to their happiness at the wedding, had been talking to Sienna behind his back. Some calls lasted over an hour, one at 2 a.m. just last week. Evan's jaw clenched. He didn't confront her. Not yet. He needed more. He moved to their joint bank account, pulling up statements he'd never thought to check. Small withdrawals caught his eye. $75 at a wine bar he'd never been to, $120 at a boutique in Nashville, $200 cash pulled 3 weeks ago, the day Sienna claimed she'd been at a work event. Evan cross-referenced the dates with her errands, each charge a piece of a puzzle he hadn't wanted to solve. He found a receipt in her purse, tucked in a side pocket, for 2 cocktails and a dessert at a bar 30 miles away. Dated the night she'd said she was visiting a friend. The charges weren't for their life together. They were for a life she was building without him. Evan's hands shook as he photographed each statement, each receipt, building a case he hoped he'd never need. But the real blow came when he accessed their cloud backup. Sienna didn't know their phones were synced, a setting he'd forgotten to turn off. He found deleted messages, a thread between her and Dylan stretching back before the wedding. One from 2 months prior read, "He's got enough saved. We can pull this off," Sienna had replied. "I'll get what I can before I'm done." Evan stared at the screen, the words blurring as his anger rose. This wasn't just an affair. This was a plan, a calculated move to use him, his business, his trust, as a stepping stone. Dylan's voice from that message echoed with the same tone he'd used at the wedding. "Take care of her, man." Now dripping with mockery. Evan needed undeniable proof, something no one could deny. He hired a private investigator, a woman named Rachel he'd found through a client. She was discreet, efficient, and within 3 days, she sent him photos, Sienna and Dylan at an abandoned lot on the outskirts of Franklin, near a shuttered factory with cracked pavement and faded signs. They weren't careful, no glances over their shoulders, just Sienna stepping out of her car, Dylan waiting in his beat-up Jeep. They kissed, a deep, familiar kiss, her hands on his chest, his arm around her waist. One photo showed Dylan handing her an envelope, thick, possibly cash, Evan's cash. The betrayal burned hotter than he'd expected. He'd seen enough, but he wasn't done. He drove to the bar from the receipt, a dimly lit place called the Rusty Lantern. The bartender remembered Sienna, blonde, hazel eyes. "Came in with a guy last month," he said. "They seemed close, ordered martinis, laughed a lot." Evan nodded, slipping him a $20 for the info. The confirmation was another nail in the coffin. Back home, Sienna acted as if nothing had changed. She'd come home late again, her hair swept back, a faint smile on her lips. "Work was hectic," she said, not meeting his eyes. Evan watched her, his silence unnerving her. "You okay?" she asked, her tone clipped. "Fine," he replied, his voice steady, but inside, he was a live wire, sparking with rage and resolve. He didn't confront her, not yet. He needed to be strategic, to protect what was his business, his home, his dignity. Sienna went to bed, her phone glowing as always. But Evan stayed in his office, the rain outside a steady drum, each drop a reminder of the storm he was about to unleash. He had the proof, the photos, the messages, the receipts, and with every piece, he felt the man he'd been, the trusting husband, the loving brother, slip away, replaced by someone new, someone who wouldn't let betrayal go unanswered. He knew what came next, and as the night wore on, Evan prepared for a fight he never thought he'd have to wage. A crisp November wind swept through Franklin, Tennessee, rattling the shutters of Evan Mitchell's home as he stood in the kitchen, the scent of burnt toast lingering from an absent-minded attempt at breakfast. It was 2 months since the wedding, and the evidence of Sienna's betrayal, photos, messages, receipts, lay spread across the counter. Each piece a wound he'd stitched into a plan. Evan had made his decision. The marriage was a fraud, a scheme built on lies with Dylan, and he wouldn't let it stand. He'd called his lawyer, Tom Grayson, a grizzled veteran who'd handled a union dispute for Evan's crew years ago. Tom's voice was gruff but steady. "We're filing for an annulment, Evan, with cause, fraud and infidelity. You've got the proof. Let's hit hard." Evan agreed, his voice firm despite the ache in his chest. "Do it," he said, and within days, the papers were served. Evan wasn't home when the process server arrived. He'd planned it that way, staying late at a job site to avoid the initial explosion. Sienna called him an hour later, her voice a mix of fury and panic. "Evan, what is this? You can't just end it like this," she screamed. "It's not ending, Sienna," he replied, his tone cold. "It never started. You and Dylan planned this before the vows. You used me." A pause, then fake tears. "Please, Evan, we can fix this," she pleaded. But he hung up, her words hollow against the truth he'd uncovered. Sienna retaliated fast, filing a counterclaim for alimony. claiming emotional distress and coercion over a prenup Evan had insisted on, a move he'd made months ago when a friend warned him about marriage risks. Her lawyer's slick arguments painted Evan as the villain, but he had his arsenal. Photos of Sienna and Dylan kissing, bank statements, deleted texts plotting to bleed him dry. The court date arrived. A tense morning in a sterile courtroom. Sienna wore a demure gray dress, her eyes red, likely from a calculated cry. Dylan was absent, perhaps too cowardly to face the fallout. Her lawyer, a polished man with a rehearsed smile, argued. My client was manipulated, forced into a marriage she didn't want. But Tom countered with evidence, laying out the photos, the call logs, the messages. This was a calculated scheme, Tom said, his voice cutting through the room. She married him for his business, with his brother as her accomplice. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair and a no-nonsense air, barely flinched, reviewing the proof in silence. Evan took the stand, his voice steady. She married me for money, cheated with my brother, and tried to take more when I found out. I just want my life back. The judge's gavel fell. Annulment granted, prenup stands, no alimony. She ruled. Sienna stormed out, her lawyer trailing. Evan felt no triumph, just a quiet relief. The battle wasn't over, though. The real confrontation came at Thanksgiving. His parents had invited him to their farmhouse. We miss you, Evan, his mom said, her voice soft. He walked in, expecting a meal, but found Sienna and Dylan at the table. His mom rushed over. Evan, please, let's talk. They said it was a mistake, just a fling. His dad nodded. Family forgives, son. Evan's laugh was bitter. A mistake? They planned to drain me, Mom. Dad? This was no fling. Sienna avoided his gaze. Dylan offered a weak smile. Come on, man. We're family, he said. Evan stepped closer, his voice low. You stopped being family when you kissed her. Dylan. And you, Sienna, you're a thief in a wedding dress. His mom flinched. He's your brother, she whispered. And she's your daughter-in-law. Evan shot back. If you side with them, stay with them. He turned, leaving the turkey untouched, their voices fading as he drove away. The days after were raw, but healing. Evan focused on his business. His crew rallied around him, their respect growing as he rebuilt. Then came Mara, a 36-year-old accountant who'd handled his taxes for 2 years. She stopped by one afternoon with updated ledgers, her dark hair pulled back, her smile warm but not forced. You look better, she said. Noticing his steadier demeanor, Evan chuckled. Rough few months, he admitted. She lingered. I've seen you through worse numbers. You're tougher than you think. They talked, her humor easing the weight. Over coffee, she shared stories of her hiking trips, her quiet life. No pressure, just presence. Evan felt seen, not as a victim, but as himself. They started meeting for lunch, then walks along the Harpeth River. Mara didn't push, her kindness a contrast to Sienna's games. One Saturday, helping her move a bookshelf, Evan laughed at her clumsy stacking. A real laugh, and Mara grinned. You're not half bad at this, she teased. They built something slow, honest. As winter settled, Evan heard Sienna had left for Nashville, chasing another mark. Dylan lost his job. Their parents sent a card. No apology, just a plea for forgiveness. Evan didn't burn it, but didn't reply. His life shifted. Sundays became hikes with Mara, evenings fixing circuits with his crew, and one night, on his porch, the air crisp, Mara beside him with a mug of cocoa. Evan realized he'd reclaimed more than his name. He'd found peace, a life built on trust, not deception, and as the stars glittered over Franklin, he knew he was finally free.